Hey dreamers, welcome back to the official Sleep Whisperer. Tonight, we're not just falling asleep, we're drifting through history. So before you close your eyes, take a deep breath, let the world outside grow quiet. If you haven't already, subscribe for more whispered journeys through time and calm. Dim the lights, settle in, and let my voice carry you softly into the past, as we fall asleep to the complete history of the Great Depression. The year is 1920. The Great War has ended. The world is tired, but hopeful. Cities buzz with new life, jazz spilling from open windows, the rhythm of progress pulsing through every street. Automobiles hum where horses once trotted. Electric light fills the nights that were once lit only by candle or moon. In the United States, the air itself feels lighter, as if possibility hangs in every breath. Factories roar, skyscrapers climb, and fortunes are made overnight. People believe in a new era, an era where the future can only shine brighter. Women, newly empowered by the right to vote, step boldly into public life. They cut their hair short, wear dresses that swish above the ankle, and dance to the new sound of freedom, jazz. In smoky clubs and glittering ballrooms, the music of Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington fills the air, and for a moment, the world feels young and unstoppable. They call it the Roaring Twenties, a decade of laughter, champagne, and dreams written in gold. But beneath the laughter, the rhythm of the decade hides a faster, quieter beat, a pulse that grows more frantic with every passing year. Let's drift closer. Picture a New York skyline, tall, gleaming, and alive. Wall Street is the new cathedral of faith, and its altar is the stock market. Every man, every woman, believes they can be rich if they just play the game. Newspapers call it the bull market, and it feels like the entire country is running toward a golden horizon. But that horizon, like all mirages, will fade. For now, though, no one sees the warning signs. Factories produce more goods than people can buy. Farmers grow more crops than the markets can hold. But still, optimism reigns. People buy on credit. Cars, radios, even stocks. Not with cash, but with hope. Hope that tomorrow will always bring more. And in those glittering nights, hope is enough. Now imagine the small towns, quiet and steady, where the hum of the city feels like a distant dream. Farmers rise before dawn, their fields stretching endlessly beneath the morning fog. The soil is generous, but prices are falling. And though no one says it aloud, the farmers already feel the chill of something coming. While the cities dance to jazz, the countryside listens to the wind, a soft warning carried across the plains. In Hollywood, the silver screen shines brighter than ever. Movies offer escape, stories of love, luxury, and laughter. Audiences sit in the dark, faces glowing in the flicker of light. They fall in love with stars who never age, who never worry, who never wake up wondering what tomorrow will bring. For a few hours, life is perfect. Radio brings the world closer. Families gather around it, listening to music, baseball games, and the president's calm voice. Technology feels like magic, bridging oceans, collapsing distance, making people believe they are part of something vast and unstoppable. And yet, history teaches us, when the music grows loudest, the silence that follows often feels the deepest. By 1925, America feels invincible. Airplanes soar across the sky. Money moves faster than thought. Ordinary people speak in the language of investments, bonds, and speculation. Everyone wants a piece of the future. And why not? The stock market only ever seems to rise. Newspapers celebrate record highs. The phrase "get rich quick" becomes a national anthem. Even those who can barely afford their rent find themselves buying stocks on margin, borrowing money to chase dreams that sparkle just out of reach. Banks encourage it. Politicians celebrate it. It feels like destiny. But destiny, dreamers, has a strange way of shifting when no one is looking. The late 1920s are a fever dream. Speakeasies hum behind hidden doors. Flappers dance until dawn. Men in sharp suits toast to endless prosperity. No one wants to believe the illusion could end. They build towers to touch the clouds, each one a symbol of human ambition, each one casting a longer shadow. If you listen closely now, beneath the laughter, beneath the jazz and champagne, you can almost hear it. A faint crack in the glittering glass of the decade. A whisper, a warning, a tremor before the fall. Across the ocean, Europe is rebuilding. Nations scarred by war borrow heavily to restore their cities. Money flows from America to Europe and back again. A dance of debt and dependency that no one fully understands. But as long as the rhythm continues, no one questions the tune. Governments speak of stability. Bankers speak of endless growth. And the people, the dreamers, the workers, the young, believe them. Because believing is easier than seeing. Now, close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the last golden summer of the decade, 1929. The air is warm, the music joyful, the future still bright. On Wall Street, brokers laugh and cheer. On Main Street, families talk about the good life that feels within reach. And yet, in the hush between the notes, the air feels heavier. Something unseen begins to stir, like a storm gathering far beyond the horizon. No one knows it yet, but the dance is ending. The music will stop, and when it does, the silence will echo around the world. The roaring 20s will fade, not with a scream, but with a whisper that begins as a tremor in the markets, then grows into a wave that will wash across nations. A whisper that will change everything: work, wealth, family, faith. A whisper that will test the soul of a generation. But that is a story for another night. For now, as you drift deeper into sleep, hold on to this moment. A decade suspended between joy and tragedy, between laughter and loss. The twilight of an age when the world believed nothing could go wrong. So rest now, dreamer. The lights of the 1920s are dimming. The music is slowing, and the quiet before the storm has settled in. As you breathe softly, remember, even in history's most fragile moments, beauty lingers in the way people dance, the way they dream, the way they carry hope even when they do not see the shadows ahead. Tomorrow, we'll wake in 1929, when the dream ends and the Great Depression begins. But tonight, let the golden glow of the jazz age guide you into rest. Let the laughter of a world on the edge fade into your dreams, and let history whisper you to sleep. And as you settle in, we drift gently into the autumn of 1929, a season of brilliance and the first whispers of collapse. It is late October. The streets of New York glisten with rain. Newspapers flutter in the wind, their headlines still bright with hope. Stocks have reached new heights. The nation seems unstoppable, but beneath the surface, something fragile trembles. For months, the market has been rising faster than reason. People trade not out of knowledge, but out of faith, a belief that the numbers will always go higher. Taxi drivers, waiters, teachers, small-town shopkeepers all speak of stocks and shares as though they were magic coins. Many borrow money to buy them, stacking dreams upon debt, unaware that every step takes them closer to the edge. The engine of prosperity hums too loudly for doubt. But in the quiet corners of Wall Street, some have begun to worry. Whispers of overvaluation drift through the air, and those who listen closely can almost feel the tension gathering, like static before a storm. As the sun rises on Thursday, October 24th, 1929, the illusion shatters. Traders flood the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Papers fly, phones ring, voices rise in panic. Prices begin to fall, slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. No one knows why, not exactly. But suddenly, everyone wants to sell. And no one wants to buy. Within hours, billions of dollars vanish, not into thin air, but into silence. The laughter of the jazz age fades into the echo of shouting brokers. And outside, crowds gather on Wall Street. Their faces pale, their hearts caught between disbelief and dread. The papers will call it Black Thursday. But for those living it, it feels more like the end of something too beautiful to last. Banks scramble to calm the panic. A group of powerful financiers steps forward, buying up large blocks of stock to steady the fall. For a brief moment, it works. By Friday, the market seems to recover. Headlines speak of renewed confidence. People breathe again. But deep down, the fear lingers. And fear, once it settles, rarely lets go. The following week, the world awakens to Black Monday. October 28th. Prices plummet once more, this time with no savior to stop the fall. Thousands of investors rush to sell. Phones jam. Brokers shout themselves hoarse. And as the sun dips behind the Manhattan skyline, a sense of something irreversible fills the air. Then comes Black Tuesday, October 29th. The day the dream finally breaks. Over 16 million shares are traded in a single day. Fortunes evaporate in hours. Men who once felt invincible watch their life's work disappear before their eyes. And across America, a new sound replaces the jazz and laughter, the stunned silence of disbelief. In the days that follow, the news spreads like wind through wheat. Banks fail. Businesses close. Families who had trusted in prosperity wake to find their savings gone. Stocks that once symbolized wealth are now worthless paper. The streets of New York, once glowing with energy, seem dimmer, quieter, as if the city itself has forgotten how to breathe. In small towns, the effects are slower, but no less painful. Farmers, already struggling with low prices, now find credit impossible to get. Store owners watch as customers disappear, one by one. Factories slow, then stop. And though no one yet calls it a depression, the word hangs unspoken in the air, heavy, inevitable. Let's pause here for a moment, dreamer. Imagine the stillness of those first nights after the crash. City lights glowing faintly. People gathered around radios. Voices low, wondering what went wrong. Some blame greed. Some blame luck. Others whisper of fate, that perhaps the world had been moving too fast and needed to fall silent for a while. In that silence, you can almost hear the heartbeat of history slowing down. As the weeks turn to months, the panic deepens. Banks call in loans, desperate to stay alive. But as people withdraw their savings in fear, the banks themselves begin to collapse. It's a cruel circle. The more people panic, the worse it becomes. By early 1930, thousands of banks have failed. Families who once trusted their life's savings to the teller's smile now find themselves standing in long lines, waiting for answers that never come. On street corners, men sell apples for a nickel. Newspapers print stories of despair. And yet, amid the darkness, there are still flickers of resilience. Neighbors sharing food, churches opening their doors, musicians playing softly in the night. Because even in sorrow, the human spirit seeks its rhythm. Many look to President Herbert Hoover for guidance. He urged patience, assuring the nation that prosperity was just around the corner. But the corner never came. Factories lay silent. The hum of modern America quieted to a whisper. The dream of the roaring 20s was now a ghost wandering through breadlines and empty streets. Still, hope, fragile though it was, refused to die. For every business that closed, someone somewhere held on to faith that tomorrow would bring light again. And so, as 1929 fades into memory, the world enters a long winter of hardship. But from this darkness, new voices will rise. Voices of courage, leadership, and change. The story of the Great Depression is not only about loss, but about resilience, adaptation, and rediscovery of strength. So now, as you drift deeper into rest, picture the city lights dimming one by one. The streets quiet, the air still. History exhales, and time pauses at the edge of a new era. The crash has come and gone. The dream has fallen silent. But within that silence lies the seed of renewal. A promise that even after the darkest nights, the dawn will return. Breathe in, breathe out. Let the echo of the past fade into the softness of sleep. For tonight, the story rests. And so do you. The year is 1931. The glow of the city lights has dimmed. Once, shop windows sparkled with luxury, but now they stand empty, reflections of a vanished dream. Factories that roared with energy only a few years earlier now sit still, their chimneys cold, their gates locked. In the streets, men in worn coats gather at dawn, searching for work that doesn't exist. Their faces are lined with fatigue, but in their eyes, a quiet determination still flickers, the will to endure. Everywhere, the same scenes repeat. In Chicago, in Detroit, in New York, and across the small towns of America, families face the same question each morning. How will we eat today? For the first time, hunger has become a neighbor to millions. The word breadline enters the national vocabulary, a symbol of dignity meeting desperation. Imagine it, a long line stretching down a city block, men and women wrapped in coats against the wind, hands tucked deep into pockets not for warmth, but for humility. At the end of the line, volunteers ladle thin soup into bowls, hand out slices of bread. Simple, small gestures of mercy that mean everything. For many, this single meal is all they will eat that day. And yet, amid the cold and the hunger. There is something deeply human, the quiet kindness of strangers, the patience of those who wait without complaint, the shared understanding that everyone, rich or poor, is now bound by the same fragile thread. In small towns, the crisis looks different but feels the same. Farmers, once the backbone of prosperity, now find their fields worthless. Prices for crops have fallen so low that it costs more to harvest them than to let them rot. Some destroy their produce in protest, while others, unable to pay their debts, lose their land entirely. Families pack what little they own into battered trucks and head west, chasing rumors of work, migrating like the dust itself, drawn by the faint hope of survival. Children ride in the backs of those trucks, eyes wide, watching the world blur past. Cornfields, small towns, endless roads. For them, adventure and hardship blur together. For their parents, it is the quiet ache of dreams slipping away. The cities grow heavier with sorrow. Parks become home to the homeless. Shanty towns rise from the earth, clusters of cardboard and tin built by the forgotten. They call them Hoovervilles, after the president whose name becomes synonymous with despair. At night, the glow of tiny fires lights these makeshift homes. Families huddle together, telling stories to chase away the dark. Mothers hum lullabies they can no longer believe in. Fathers stare silently at the embers, wondering how long this winter will last. And yet, even here, in the lowest depths, the human spirit finds ways to endure. Neighbors share what little they have. Children laugh despite empty bellies. Men gather to trade ideas, hoping to rebuild what was lost. In the quiet between the cold and the hunger, you can still hear life, fragile but unbroken. The newspapers speak in numbers. Unemployment, production, debt. But behind each number is a story. A mother skipping her own meal so her child can eat. A young man walking miles to apply for work he knows he won't get. A teacher, once respected, now sweeping streets just to earn a few cents. The Great Depression is no longer a headline. It is a daily reality, a shadow that touches every home, a silence that fills every dinner table. And yet, history tells us, even in the darkest moments, light lingers. Charity kitchens bloom in church basements and warehouses. Communities form out of necessity, built on compassion rather than wealth. In one corner of a city, a baker leaves loaves on his doorstep for the hungry. In another, musicians play on street corners, their songs carrying a kind of courage words cannot. Across the nation, quiet acts of humanity begin to stitch together what the crash had torn apart. These small kindnesses do not end the depression, but they remind the world of something essential. That hope, once kindled, refuses to die. By 1932, the crisis reaches its lowest point. 1 in every 4 Americans is unemployed. Children go barefoot through the snow. Letters pour into Washington, pleas for food, for shelter, for relief. But out of that desperation, a movement begins to stir, a belief that change must come, that the old ways of waiting and wishing are no longer enough. Whispers of a new leader, a new vision, begin to spread across the country, and soon, that whisper will take the shape of a voice, calm, confident, and filled with promise. For now, though, the nation rests in its silence. The breadlines stretch on, the soup kitchens stay full, and the empty tables glow faintly in the candlelight of endurance. Somewhere, a mother tucks her children in, whispering that tomorrow will be better. Somewhere, a man looks at his hands and decides that, even if the world has stopped believing, he is not. The Great Depression is not only the story of loss, it is the story of resilience, of ordinary people standing quietly in extraordinary times. So as you drift into sleep tonight, imagine those quiet streets, those dim windows, the smell of bread and soup in the cold air. Picture the strength it takes to stand in line with dignity, to share when you have little, to hope when hope seems impossible. Let that strength wrap around you like a blanket. Let the whispers of the past fade softly into your dreams. For even in the darkest chapters of history, there is always warmth, found not in riches, but in the human heart that refuses to surrender. Breathe in, breathe out. The breadlines fade, the night grows still, and history, once again, falls asleep beside you. As the chill of the early 1930s settled over America, the world that once roared with music, laughter, and promise had gone quiet. The rhythm of jazz was replaced by the shuffle of worn-out shoes on pavement. Cities that once sparkled with the glow of opportunity now dimmed under the weight of despair. And in every corner of the nation, from the steel towns of Pennsylvania to the cotton fields of Mississippi, hunger began to whisper its haunting refrain. The Great Depression wasn't only an economic collapse, it was a human story. Families that once had enough found themselves lining up before dawn, waiting for a single bowl of soup or a piece of bread. Men who had proudly worked for years now stood in bread lines that stretched down entire city blocks, their faces hidden beneath worn hats, their dignity quietly fading with each passing day. In New York City alone, thousands gathered at the doors of makeshift soup kitchens run by churches and charities. Steam rose from the large metal pots, mixing with the cold morning air. Volunteers ladled thin broth into chipped bowls, trying to feed as many as they could. Some children smiled, grateful for a warm meal. Others stared silently, the hollowness in their eyes speaking louder than words. At home, kitchen tables stood bare. Mothers stretched every scrap of food, turning leftovers into meals and hope into survival. Dinners once shared with laughter became quiet affairs, as families pretended not to notice empty plates. Parents often went hungry so their children could eat, whispering promises that tomorrow would be better, even when they weren't sure it would be. In the countryside, the situation was no easier. Farmers watched their crops fail, their animals sold for pennies or starved outright. Banks seized land that had been in families for generations, leaving entire communities uprooted. Trucks loaded with furniture and memories rumbled down dusty roads, symbols of dreams undone. The sound of an auctioneer's hammer meant another family had lost everything. But even in the face of despair, small sparks of humanity glimmered. Neighbors shared what little they had: a loaf of bread, a cup of flour, a kind word. Communities formed networks of care, turning empty lots into gardens and abandoned buildings into shelters. Strangers became family, bound not by blood, but by endurance. In these years, the image of America shifted. It was no longer just the land of abundance. It was the land of endurance, of quiet resilience. People learned to mend, to reuse, to find meaning in the smallest comforts. A warm coat passed from one child to another became an heirloom of love. A pot of soup stretched to feed many became a symbol of hope. There were moments of bitter irony, too. In the heart of cities, grocery store windows overflowed with food, but behind them stood guards and locked doors. The problem wasn't the lack of goods, it was the lack of money to buy them. America had abundance trapped behind glass, just out of reach for millions. Newspapers told stories of hunger marches and protests. Men carried signs demanding work, not charity. In Washington, D.C., veterans of the Great War, the Bonus Army, camped out to claim the payments they had been promised. Their pleas were met not with compassion, but with force, as soldiers cleared their camps in the summer heat. It was a painful reminder that even those who had once served their nation could find themselves forgotten. And yet, amid the hardship, art and culture found a way to survive. Folk songs rose from the dust, carrying the voices of those who had lost everything but hope. Woody Guthrie sang of breadlines and wanderers, turning struggle into poetry. Writers and photographers documented the human side of the Depression. Dorothea Lange's photographs, capturing the face of a migrant mother, became timeless testaments to resilience. In towns across America, radio programs became lifelines. Families would gather around, the soft glow of the dial lighting their faces, listening to news, stories, and music that reminded them they weren't alone. For an hour or two, the static-filled voices on the airwaves carried them somewhere else. A place where laughter still lived and dreams still mattered. Children born in these years would carry the memory of scarcity for the rest of their lives. They learned to save everything, to never waste food, to treasure every possession. The sound of an empty stomach became a teacher more powerful than any classroom. They would grow up to build a nation that valued hard work and stability above all else. As the decade continued, relief efforts began to take shape. Soup kitchens expanded, and organizations like the Red Cross worked tirelessly to provide clothing and shelter. But the sheer scale of suffering was overwhelming. It became clear that charity alone could not solve a crisis that reached so deep into the fabric of society. By 1932, unemployment had reached nearly 25%. 1 in 4 Americans had no job. Entire cities became symbols of economic ruin. Detroit, Cleveland, St. Louis, where factory doors remained closed and silence filled the air once alive with machinery. The pride of a working nation had been humbled. And yet, even in the darkest nights of the Depression, there remained a fragile thread of hope. A belief that something better could come, that America, wounded but not broken, could rise again. It was this quiet faith, whispered around empty tables and in long bread lines, that kept the spirit of a nation alive. As the years turned and new leadership prepared to take the stage, the sound of change began to stir. A man with a calm voice and a confident smile would soon promise a new deal, a chance to rebuild, to restore not just the economy, but the heart of a people. But before that promise, there were still hungry mouths, weary souls, and long, cold nights. And in those nights, people found strength in one another, learning that even when the world seems empty, kindness can fill it again. So as you drift into sleep tonight, imagine those quiet streets, the faint smell of bread drifting from a soup kitchen, the murmur of tired voices waiting for morning. Picture the flicker of hope that refused to die, even when everything else seemed lost. Because in the story of the Great Depression, even in its bleakest chapter, the softest whispers of compassion carried the promise of a new dawn. And as you rest, let that whisper remind you, hope, once found, never truly disappears. It only waits for the world to be ready to hear it again. The land itself seemed to sigh beneath the weight of the 1930s. Once rich and fertile, America's Great Plains had been a symbol of promise, an endless sea of golden wheat under an open sky. But as the decade deepened, that golden promise turned to gray. The earth cracked, the sky darkened, and a storm unlike any other began to rise, not of water, but of dust. This was the Dust Bowl, a disaster not born of war or politics, but of wind, soil, and human ambition. For decades, farmers had tilled the plains, pushing the land to its limits. The native grasses that once held the soil in place were uprooted to make way for crops. When the rain stopped, the earth had nothing left to cling to. The result was devastating. A landscape stripped bare, surrendering its life to the sky. It began with small winds, whispers across the fields. But soon, those whispers grew into a roar. Massive black clouds of dust rolled across Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and beyond, walls of earth that blotted out the sun. Day turned to night in minutes. People covered their faces with damp cloths, but the dust found its way in through every crack and seam. It filled lungs, coated food, and settled on sleeping children like a cruel blanket. Inside homes, families tried to seal windows with rags and newspapers, but it was never enough. The air was thick with grit. Mothers would sweep and dust again and again, but by the time they finished one corner, another was already covered. Kitchens smelled not of bread or stew, but of soil. People spoke in hushed voices, afraid that even their words might stir the dust. Farmers watched helplessly as their crops withered and their livestock perished. The land that had once sustained them now turned against them. With every storm, hope seemed to drift away on the wind. Fields that once shimmered with wheat became barren wastelands. Fences disappeared beneath dunes of dust. Wells dried up. Families sold what little they had to survive. First their tools, then their furniture, and finally, their homes. Many began to pack their belongings onto rickety trucks and head west, chasing rumors of fertile fields and steady work. They became known as Okies, though many came from far beyond Oklahoma. Their journey was long and uncertain. The highways were lined with families carrying all they owned, their faces streaked with exhaustion and dust. They traveled toward California, a place they imagined as a new Eden, a land of sunshine, fruit trees, and opportunity. But when they arrived, they found something far different. The fields were already crowded with other migrants, all desperate for the same scarce jobs. Wages were low, living conditions harsh. Many built shelters out of scrap wood and canvas, forming makeshift camps known as Hoovervilles. Still, even amid this hardship, there was resilience. The migrants shared what little they had. A pot of beans could feed a family and a neighbor. Children played barefoot in the dust, their laughter rising above the despair. Songs were sung by campfires at night, songs of sorrow, yes, but also of survival. Woody Guthrie's voice carried across the plains and the valleys, giving a name to their struggle and their strength. Back on the plains, those who stayed learned to adapt. They changed the way they farmed, planting crops that could withstand the drought. They dug new wells, built windbreaks, and slowly began to heal the land. Government programs, part of Roosevelt's New Deal, offered aid and education, teaching farmers new methods of soil conservation. The Civilian Conservation Corps planted trees to hold the earth in place, creating green belts that still stand today. But recovery came slowly, and the scars of the Dust Bowl ran deep. Entire towns disappeared from the map. Families were scattered across states, their roots torn up along with the prairie grass. The psychological toll was immense. People spoke of dust pneumonia, of losing faith in the soil that had once given them everything. The sky itself became a symbol of fear, each cloud on the horizon bringing uncertainty. And yet, through it all, there was a quiet strength that refused to fade. The people of the plains, hardened by wind and loss, found ways to endure. They rebuilt their lives one season at a time, one harvest at a time. They learned humility in the face of nature and hope in the smallest signs, a sprout of green in the dry earth, a single drop of rain on a parched window pane. The Dust Bowl was more than an environmental tragedy. It was a mirror reflecting the deeper struggle of the Great Depression. It showed how human ambition and nature are forever intertwined, how prosperity built on fragile foundations can crumble overnight. But it also revealed the resilience at the heart of the American spirit, the belief that even when the earth turns to dust, life will find a way to rise again. Writers like John Steinbeck captured this truth in haunting prose. His novel The Grapes of Wrath told the story of the Joad family, migrants driven from their Oklahoma farm. Through them, the suffering of millions found a voice. Steinbeck's words were raw and real, filled with both pain and dignity. They reminded the world that behind every statistic, there was a human story, a mother's tears, a child's hunger, a man's broken dream. By the late 1930s, the worst of the Dust Bowl began to fade. Rain returned to the plains, timid at first, then steady. The soil, tended with new care, began to breathe again. Slowly, the land healed, and so did the people. The lessons learned during those years would never be forgotten. Respect for the earth, the importance of community, and the strength that comes from enduring together. So as you drift to sleep tonight, imagine that vast horizon, the endless sky stretching over the plains, the quiet hum of wind across newly green fields. Picture the families gathered at sunset, their faces lit by the last golden light of day, whispering prayers of gratitude for the rain, for the earth, for another chance. The dust has long settled, but its story remains, a whisper of resilience carried through time. And in that whisper is a reminder. Even when the world feels barren, hope can take root again, as softly and surely as grass growing through cracked earth. Sleep now, dreamer, and let the wind carry you gently across the plains, where from dust and despair, the seeds of renewal were quietly sown. Night fell differently during the Great Depression. It wasn't simply the absence of light. It was a quiet that seemed to settle deep into the bones. For millions of Americans, the nights were long, heavy with worry and longing. But even in the darkness, there was something fragile yet powerful that refused to die, the dream of a better tomorrow. In the small towns and crowded cities, when the lamps were turned low to save on oil and electricity, people would sit in silence, listening to the hum of the radio. The warm crackle of static filled the air like a heartbeat. It was a comfort, a companion that reminded them they weren't alone. Voices drifted through those airwaves, voices of newsmen, of preachers, of singers who carried hope in their words. Franklin D. Roosevelt's calm and steady tone reached into homes through his fireside chats, speaking directly to the people as if to say, "We will get through this together." The nights were full of dreams, some fragile, some fierce. Men who had lost their jobs dreamed of work, of feeling useful again, of standing tall with purpose. Women dreamed of warm meals for their children, of laughter returning to their kitchens. Children dreamed of things as simple as candy, new shoes, or a full stomach. These were modest dreams, but in their simplicity lay their power. And yet, not all dreams came easily. For many, the nights brought anxiety, thoughts that crept in when the house went quiet. What would tomorrow bring? Would there be food? Would the landlord knock again? In the darkness, time stretched out, and every sound, the creak of a floorboard, the whisper of wind against a window, seemed to echo with uncertainty. But even then, people found ways to keep their spirits alive. Churches and community halls hosted gatherings where music and stories filled the air. Neighbors shared coffee and laughter, even if both were thin. Traveling performers brought vaudeville shows and folk songs to small towns, giving people a few hours to forget their worries. It was during these years that humor became a kind of medicine, a way to laugh at the absurdity of hardship. The movies, too, became an escape from reality. For a few cents, people could step into another world, one of glamour, romance, and hope. The theaters were warm and filled with light, a stark contrast to the dim streets outside. Films like It Happened One Night and The Wizard of Oz offered stories where struggle led to triumph, where courage and kindness won the day. Watching those films, audiences could believe, if only for a moment, that dreams could still come true. Night fell differently during the Great Depression. It wasn't simply the absence of light. It was a quiet that seemed to settle deep into the bones. For millions of Americans, the nights were long, heavy with worry and longing. But even in the darkness, there was something fragile yet powerful that refused to die: the dream of a better tomorrow. In the small towns and crowded cities, when the lamps were turned low to save on oil and electricity, people would sit in silence, listening to the hum of the radio. The warm crackle of static filled the air like a heartbeat. It was a comfort, a companion that reminded them they weren't alone. Voices drifted through those airwaves, voices of newsmen, of preachers, of singers who carried hope in their words. Franklin D. Roosevelt's calm and steady tone reached into homes through his fireside chats, speaking directly to the people as if to say, "We will get through this together." The nights were full of dreams, some fragile, some fierce. Men who had lost their jobs dreamed of work, of feeling useful again, of standing tall with purpose. Women dreamed of warm meals for their children, of laughter returning to their kitchens. Children dreamed of things as simple as candy, new shoes, or a full stomach. These were modest dreams, but in their simplicity lay their power. And yet, not all dreams came easily. For many, the nights brought anxiety, thoughts that crept in when the house went quiet. What would tomorrow bring? Would there be food? Would the landlord knock again? In the darkness, time stretched out, and every sound, the creak of a floorboard, the whisper of wind against a window, seemed to echo with uncertainty. But even then, people found ways to keep their spirits alive. Churches and community halls hosted gatherings where music and stories filled the air. Neighbors shared coffee and laughter, even if both were thin. Traveling performers brought vaudeville shows and folk songs to small towns, giving people a few hours to forget their worries. It was during these years that humor became a kind of medicine, a way to laugh at the absurdity of hardship. The movies, too, became an escape from reality. For a few cents, people could step into another world, one of glamour, romance, and hope. The theaters were warm and filled with light, a stark contrast to the dim streets outside. Films like It Happened One Night and The Wizard of Oz offered stories where struggle led to triumph, where courage and kindness won the day. Watching those films, audiences could believe, if only for a moment, that dreams could still come true. In these dark times, creativity flourished quietly. Painters, writers, and musicians turned their struggles into art. Langston Hughes wrote poems that carried both sorrow and strength, giving voice to the unheard. Dorothea Lange's photographs captured haunting images of migrant mothers and dusty roads, freezing pain and resilience in a single frame. Artists didn't shy away from the truth. They revealed it, showing that even in suffering, beauty could exist. The Federal Art Project, part of Roosevelt's New Deal, employed thousands of artists and writers. They painted murals on post office walls, wrote state guides, and performed plays that told stories of ordinary people. Through their work, they preserved the spirit of a nation refusing to give up. The dream of America was being rebuilt, not just in banks and factories, but in imagination itself. In rural areas, the darkness took on a different meaning. There were no bright city lights, only the vast night sky stretching endlessly above. Families would sit on porches or near dying campfires, gazing up at the stars. Out there, far from the noise of the world, dreams felt closer, like distant lanterns, reminding them that there was something bigger than their struggle. And sometimes, in that quiet, people shared stories. Stories of better times, of ancestors who had crossed oceans or survived wars. Those stories became a form of light, soft, steady, and enduring. They taught children that every hardship had an ending, that no winter lasted forever. The Great Depression taught people the power of dreaming small, of finding meaning in the everyday. A loaf of bread rising in the oven, a child's laughter, the kindness of a stranger. These were victories worth celebrating. People began to understand that hope wasn't something grand or distant. It was something built moment by moment, breath by breath. As the decade moved forward, the darkness began to shift. It didn't vanish all at once. It softened, as if dawn was slowly, tenderly approaching. Programs like the Works Progress Administration, WPA, and the Civilian Conservation Corps put people back to work, giving them not just wages, but dignity. Men planted trees, built roads, and repaired parks. They came home tired but proud, their hands dirty with honest labor. In the evenings, when they sat down to eat, the air around the table felt lighter. There was still worry, yes, but also purpose. Families began to plan again, to talk about the future, not just the past. For children growing up in these years, the world seemed both fragile and full of promise. They learned that happiness didn't come from abundance, but from endurance. They learned to dream carefully, but never to stop dreaming. Some would later grow up to fight in World War II, carrying with them the lessons of perseverance learned in these hard times. Even now, decades later, the spirit of those dreams lingers. The Great Depression was not just a story of loss. It was a story of endurance, of light flickering in the darkest hours. It was a story of people who, though battered and weary, refused to let the night swallow them whole. So as you drift into sleep tonight, imagine those quiet evenings long ago, the glow of a radio dial, the soft murmur of voices sharing stories, the promise of a better dawn. Feel the warmth of their hope, fragile yet unbroken, echoing through time. Because even in the darkest chapters of history, dreams continued to bloom, softly, stubbornly, in the hearts of those who refuse to give up. And as your eyes close, let those dreams become your own. Let them remind you that every night, no matter how deep the shadows, carries within it the whisper of morning light. When the land gave way beneath their feet and the jobs disappeared like smoke, millions of Americans took to the road. Highways once meant for progress, and trade became rivers of wandering souls. They were families with everything they owned packed into the back of a truck, young men with bedrolls slung over their shoulders, and dreamers chasing rumors of work. They were the lost generation of the Great Depression, nomads of necessity, traveling not for adventure, but for survival. The sound of their journey was a chorus of engines sputtering, boots scraping against gravel, and the low hum of wind through open windows. Dust and distance became their constant companions. They slept under bridges, in fields, or in the shadows of freight yards. The road stretched endlessly ahead, an uncertain promise, but a promise nonetheless. Some left because they had to, others because staying meant starvation. From the plains of Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas, entire families fled the choking storms of dust and despair. They were called Okies by those who met them on the road, a word often spoken with scorn, though their suffering was shared by many. They drove west toward California, lured by stories of green fields and steady pay. There's work out there, they said, fruit to pick, orchards to tend. But when they arrived, they found fields full of workers already waiting and wages that could barely buy bread. Still, they stayed. They pitched tents by rivers, built shacks from tin and tar paper, and called them home. The camps that formed, some official, others not, were rough and crowded, but they were alive with resilience. In the evenings, men repaired their tools by lamplight while women cooked whatever scraps they could find. Children ran barefoot through the dust, their laughter defying the hardship around them. In the dark, Harmonicas played soft tunes that spoke of hope, heartbreak, and endurance. For others, the road was solitary. Thousands of young men, some barely in their teens, left their families behind and set off alone. They became hobos, riding the rails from town to town, searching for odd jobs and a place to rest. They carved secret symbols into fence posts, small marks that told others where it was safe to sleep, where kindness could be found, or where danger lurked. The railways became their lifelines, their freedom, and their exile. Many of these wanderers carried little more than a blanket, a tin cup, and a dream. They learned to live by their wits, to share a meal when they could, to disappear when they had to. Some towns welcomed them with open arms. Others turned them away with suspicion. Police patrolled train yards, chasing men from boxcars. But still, they came, driven by hunger and the faint spark of hope that somewhere ahead, things might be better. Writers and photographers of the time captured their faces, the gaunt cheeks, the tired eyes, the quiet dignity. Dorothea Lange's camera found them on back roads and in migrant camps, turning their hardship into history. John Steinbeck listened to their stories and turned them into words. In The Grapes of Wrath, he wrote not just of suffering, but of human endurance, the kind that can't be broken by hunger or humiliation. His characters became symbols of an entire generation's struggle, their journey west, both physical and spiritual. Even as these wanderers faced rejection and hardship, they built a strange kind of community along the way. In hobo jungles, makeshift camps near rail lines, people shared food, traded news, and looked after one another. There was an unspoken code: treat others with respect, help those in need, and never take more than you need. It was a rough, fleeting society, but it carried a sense of belonging for those who had lost everything else. In the cities, the wandering took a different form. Men lined up each morning at factory gates, hoping for a day's work. Women cleaned houses, took in laundry, or sold baked goods from their doorsteps. Children scavenged scrap metal or collected bottles to sell. They moved constantly, not across states, but through the rhythms of uncertainty, from one small chance to another. Life became a journey, even without leaving home. The loss wasn't only of work or land, it was of identity. America had always celebrated movement, the freedom to go where you wished. But now, that same movement was born of desperation. The road no longer symbolized adventure, it symbolized survival. People were moving not toward dreams, but away from hunger. And yet, in that constant motion, something deeply human endured, the belief that if one kept going, something better might be waiting beyond the horizon. Roosevelt's New Deal began to change things slowly. The Civilian Conservation Corps, CCC, offered young men jobs planting trees, building parks, and restoring the land. The Works Progress Administration, WPA, employed artists, writers, and laborers to rebuild communities. For many wanderers, these programs offered the first stable work they'd seen in years, a reason to stop, to stay, to believe in the future again. But not everyone found a place to belong. Some kept moving long after the economy began to heal, unable or unwilling to return to the lives they'd lost. For them, the road had become a way of life, a rhythm of motion that felt safer than standing still. They were the true children of the Depression, restless, resilient, and forever seeking. And yet, even in this endless wandering, there was beauty. Travelers spoke of the kindness of strangers, a farmer offering a loaf of bread, a small-town waitress quietly slipping an extra slice of pie to a hungry drifter. Acts of generosity glimmered like lanterns in the dark, reminding everyone that humanity, though battered, still burned bright. By the late 1930s, as the nation began to recover, many of these wanderers found their way home, or built new ones. The dust began to settle, the roads quieted, and the restless generation began to put down roots once more. But the memory of those years lingered, etched deep in their hearts like the sound of a distant train whistle fading into night. So as you drift into sleep tonight, imagine those long, endless highways under a wide, starlit sky. Picture the trucks and boxcars carrying the lost generation onward, their hopes tucked between the cracks of old suitcases and folded blankets. Hear the soft hum of tires on gravel, the low whistle of wind through open doors, the murmur of a song shared beside a campfire. Because though they wandered far, They carried something precious with them, a stubborn, quiet faith that even when everything is lost, the journey itself can lead you home. And as you close your eyes, let their footsteps fade into dreams, reminding you that even in the darkest times, every path, no matter how uncertain, leads toward the light. By 1933, the United States was a nation adrift. Banks had failed by the thousands, farms lay barren, and nearly 1 in 4 Americans was out of work. Desperation had settled into the very soul of the country. Breadlines stretched across cities, farmers abandoned their land, and faith in the system itself began to wither. But as winter gave way to spring, a new voice rose across the airwaves, a calm, confident voice promising renewal. It belonged to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the man who would reshape not only America's economy, but its very spirit. When Roosevelt took the oath of office on March 4, 1933, he faced a country on the brink of collapse. Yet his words struck a chord that resonated far beyond politics. "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself," he said, and in that moment, people began to believe again. His inauguration speech was not just a call to action. It was a lullaby to a weary nation, offering reassurance that the long night of despair could indeed end. Roosevelt wasted no time. Within his first 100 days, he launched a whirlwind of reforms and programs that would come to be known as the New Deal. It was not one single plan, but a tapestry of efforts, each thread meant to stabilize, rebuild, and restore hope. Banks were the first priority. Roosevelt declared a nationwide bank holiday, temporarily closing all banks to stop the panic of withdrawals. When they reopened days later, depositors lined up not to withdraw their savings, but to return them. For the first time in years, trust had begun to stir again. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, was born from that moment, ensuring that ordinary people's money would never again vanish overnight. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, soon followed, to rein in the chaos of Wall Street and prevent the reckless speculation that had triggered the crash. For many, it was the first time they felt protected by their government rather than abandoned by it. But Roosevelt understood that banking laws alone could not feed a hungry nation. Across the countryside, farms lay in ruin and industrial cities sat silent. So the New Deal expanded outward, touching nearly every corner of American life. The Civilian Conservation Corps gave jobs to young men, sending them into forests and fields to plant trees, build parks, and restore the land ravaged by erosion. Their work not only healed the soil, but gave a restless generation purpose and pride. The Public Works Administration, PWA, and the Works Progress Administration, WPA, followed, employing millions to build roads, schools, bridges, post offices, and even works of art. Across the country, hammers struck steel, paint met canvas, and America began to hum with the sound of creation once more. People who had stood in bread lines now stood on construction sites, earning honest wages and rebuilding the nation's backbone. For those on the farms, help came through the Agricultural Adjustment Act, which sought to stabilize prices by paying farmers to reduce overproduction. It was a controversial move, telling farmers not to grow, but it worked. Slowly, agricultural prices began to rise, and farmers found themselves able to make a living again. In the cities, new agencies provided relief for the unemployed and struggling families. The Federal Emergency Relief Administration distributed direct aid, while the National Recovery Administration, NRA, worked to set fair wages and standards for industries. Its Blue Eagle symbol appeared in shop windows and factories, a mark of unity and hope in difficult times. But perhaps the most enduring gift of the New Deal came in 1935, with the creation of Social Security. For the first time, the elderly, the disabled, and the unemployed had a safety net. It was a promise that no American would face utter destitution in their later years, that a nation built on opportunity would also protect its most vulnerable. Still, not everyone agreed with Roosevelt's vision. Critics accused him of expanding government too far, of burdening business with regulations, of spending beyond reason. Others argued he had not gone far enough. Yet to the millions who found work, food, and dignity again, he was a beacon in the storm. Roosevelt's charm, warmth, and communication made him more than a president. He was a voice of reassurance. Through his fireside chats, broadcast directly into homes. He spoke plainly and sincerely, explaining his plans and calming fears. Families would gather around their radios, the glow of the dial lighting their faces, listening as if to a friend. The New Deal was not perfect, and it did not end the Great Depression overnight. But it did something far more profound. It restored faith. It taught Americans that even in the darkest times, collective action could create change. It gave the jobless dignity, the farmers hope, and the nation a renewed sense of purpose. Artists and writers were among those most deeply touched. The Federal Art Project and the Federal Writers Project gave them work that celebrated everyday life. Murals bloomed on post office walls, showing scenes of workers and farmers, of strength and perseverance. Writers chronicled the voices of ordinary Americans, capturing stories that might otherwise have been lost to time. The New Deal didn't just rebuild infrastructure, it rebuilt identity. As the decade wore on, the economy began to stir. Factories reopened. Crops returned to the fields. Children who had known only hunger began to see their parents smile again. The nation's pulse, once faint, grew stronger. And while the storm of the Great Depression had not yet fully passed, the horizon no longer seemed so dark. In quiet towns and bustling cities alike, Roosevelt's programs left behind more than roads and dams. They left behind a legacy of resilience. Communities that had once been broken began to believe again in the power of unity. The government, once seen as distant and uncaring, became a partner in rebuilding lives. As you drift into sleep tonight, picture those scenes, the steady rhythm of hammers echoing through the morning air, the laughter of workers planting trees in the sun, the hopeful murmur of families gathered by their radios. Imagine the soft voice of Roosevelt, calm and reassuring, saying that together, they could face whatever came next. Because in those years, America learned something timeless, that even in despair, progress begins with belief. That rebuilding starts not with bricks or laws, but with the quiet courage to hope again. So close your eyes, dreamer, and let the echoes of that promise guide you to rest. For in the story of the New Deal lies a truth as gentle as it is powerful, that no night, however long, can last forever when a nation dares to dream of dawn. The late 1930s arrived like the slow thaw after a long and bitter winter. For nearly a decade, the world had been trapped in the icy grip of economic despair. But now, as the decade turned, small signs of warmth began to return, softly, cautiously, as if afraid to disturb the quiet ache left behind by the Great Depression. Factories that had once stood silent began to hum again, their machines sputtering back to life. In cities across America, faint glows of industry returned to windows that had long been dark. The streets were still lined with the scars of hardship, closed shops, faded signs, and families who had lost much. But there was also a new rhythm emerging. It was the rhythm of perseverance, of people determined to rebuild their lives one step, one paycheck, one sunrise at a time. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal had planted the seeds of recovery years earlier, but by the end of the 1930s, those seeds had begun to grow roots. Projects from the Works Progress Administration and the Civilian Conservation Corps had reshaped the landscape, building roads, bridges, schools, and parks that still stood as symbols of resilience. These were not merely structures of concrete and steel. They were monuments to the human spirit's refusal to surrender. Yet, for all its progress, the world had not fully healed. Unemployment lingered, and many families still walked the line between hope and hunger. The recovery was uneven. Some industries soared, others stumbled. Farmers, though aided by new policies and improved conditions, still bore the memory of the Dust Bowl. Cities bustled once more, but rural towns struggled to keep pace. Across the ocean, nations were waking too, but their awakening carried a different sound. In Germany, factories roared not for peace, but for rearmament. In Italy and Japan, the drums of empire beat louder each year. While America mended itself through reform and community, other nations sought strength through conquest and expansion. The world, it seemed, was recovering in two directions, one toward healing, the other toward hostility. Still, in the United States, daily life began to breathe again. Radios filled homes with laughter, music, and Roosevelt's familiar voice offering reassurance. Automobiles returned to the roads, theaters reopened, and even fashion brightened as people dared to believe in color again. The stock market, though cautious, climbed steadily. It was not the feverish growth of the 1920s, but something gentler, an understanding that true prosperity needed patience and wisdom. Ordinary people, too, carried lessons from the hard years. They had learned to save, to share, to build communities where survival depended on kindness as much as courage. Neighbors helped neighbors, small towns held together through faith and friendship, and families found joy in the simple things: a warm meal, a safe bed, a quiet evening together after so many restless nights. As the world's economy slowly stirred, a quiet optimism spread like dawn across a long dark horizon. Roosevelt's government continued to guide recovery, introducing Social Security to protect the elderly and vulnerable, and strengthening labor rights that gave workers a voice. The idea of progress had shifted. It was no longer about unrestrained wealth or speculation, but about stability, fairness, and balance. And yet, beyond the borders of America, another force was rising, one that would soon reshape history once more. As Europe edged toward war, global trade began to change. Orders for American goods increased, and industries expanded to meet foreign demand. Without realizing it, the engines of war abroad were fueling the engines of recovery at home. But for now, in these last calm years before the storm, there was peace, a fragile, precious peace. Farmers tilled their fields again. Children returned to school with full stomachs. Couples walked under streetlights that glowed once more. The despair that had defined a generation was beginning to loosen its hold. The world, after years of silence, was rediscovering its voice. In towns and cities, you could feel it, the quiet hum of possibility. The Great Depression had changed people deeply. It had stripped away illusions, but left behind something purer, a belief in endurance. People no longer chased dreams of instant fortune. They valued work, community, and the small, enduring joys that wealth could never replace. The 1930s closed not with triumph, but with calm, a slow, steady awakening after a decade of darkness. The lessons of those years would shape a generation that understood both loss and gratitude. They had walked through the deepest valleys of despair and emerged wiser, humbler, and more compassionate. And though another storm loomed on the horizon, a storm called war, the world now faced it with a resilience forged in hardship. The Depression had tested humanity's spirit and, in many ways, had strengthened it. As night falls on this chapter of history, imagine the faint glow of lamplight spilling across a small town street. The air is still cool, the hum of life soft but steady. Somewhere, a radio plays a gentle tune, and families gather around dinner tables, their laughter echoing through open windows. The world is not yet whole, but it is healing. The Great Depression had taught them that no darkness lasts forever. The world, though weary, was waking once again. And as you drift into sleep, remember, recovery is not a moment, it's a journey. Just as the world slowly woke from its long night, so too do we all find our way back to light, one whisper, one breath, one dream at a time. Even in the darkest hours, there are moments when hope slips quietly between the cracks of despair. The Great Depression, with all its hardship, loss, and uncertainty, was a decade defined not only by struggle, but also by resilience. By the late 1930s and early 1940s, after years of relentless challenge, the faint, persistent stirrings of hope began to whisper across the land. These whispers were small, often unnoticed, but they carried a power far greater than the noise of fear and hardship. Families who had endured breadlines and eviction began to see glimpses of stability. Children returned to school with steady meals in their bellies. Parents found work through the New Deal programs, discovering that their labor could once again sustain them and their families. In small towns and cities alike, communities slowly rebuilt their rhythms of life. Neighbors helped neighbors, sharing tools, food, and advice, creating networks of mutual support that bound people together even tighter than before. Hope also spoke in quieter, more personal ways. In the evenings, radios filled homes with music and stories, and Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chats reassured listeners that they were not forgotten. The soothing cadence of his voice reminded millions that they were part of a larger story, one in which survival and perseverance mattered more than wealth or status. A nation battered by fear began to learn that courage could bloom in silence, that small victories mattered as much as grand triumphs. Artists and writers captured these whispers, turning ordinary life into enduring records of resilience. Photographers like Dorothea Lange framed the dignity of migrant families in black and white images, showing the world that even in the dust and despair, humanity endured. Writers chronicled the daily struggles and small triumphs of ordinary people, preserving their stories as testaments to endurance. The arts became a quiet form of hope, reminding everyone that beauty and meaning could persist even when circumstances seemed hopeless. In homes, hope was nurtured in simple routines: a shared meal, a repaired roof, a letter from a distant relative, or a child's laughter breaking through the tension. It thrived in gardens tilled with care, in small businesses reopening their doors, in conversations exchanged over fences and kitchen tables. These everyday acts, seemingly mundane, were profound declarations of survival. They were the soft, enduring whispers that life could go on, that hardship did not have the final word. Even the economy, slowly recovering, became a source of quiet reassurance. Factories once idle now produced goods again. Farms yielded crops under the guidance of new agricultural programs. Jobs returned, wages rose cautiously, and Americans began to believe once more in their ability to provide for themselves and their families. Though the scars of the Depression remained visible, the nation's pulse grew stronger, steady, and more confident. Even in the darkest hours, there are moments when hope slips quietly between the cracks of despair. The Great Depression, with all its hardship, loss, and uncertainty, was a decade defined not only by struggle, but also by resilience. By the late 1930s and early 1940s, after years of relentless challenge, the faint, persistent stirrings of hope began to whisper across the land. These whispers were small, often unnoticed, but they carried a power far greater than the noise of fear and hardship. Families who had endured breadlines and eviction began to see glimpses of stability. Children returned to school with steady meals in their bellies. Parents found work through the New Deal programs, discovering that their labor could once again sustain them and their families. In small towns and cities alike, communities slowly rebuilt their rhythms of life. Neighbors helped neighbors, sharing tools, food, and advice, creating networks of mutual support that bound people together even tighter than before. Hope also spoke in quieter, more personal ways. In the evenings, radios filled homes with music and stories, and Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chats reassured listeners that they were not forgotten. The soothing cadence of his voice reminded millions that they were part of a larger story, one in which survival and perseverance mattered more than wealth or status. A nation battered by fear began to learn that courage could bloom in silence, that small victories mattered as much as grand triumphs. Artists and writers captured these whispers, turning ordinary life into enduring records of resilience. Photographers like Dorothea Lange framed the dignity of migrant families in black and white images, showing the world that even in the dust and despair, humanity endured. Writers chronicled the daily struggles and small triumphs of ordinary people, preserving their stories as testaments to endurance. The arts became a quiet form of hope, reminding everyone that beauty and meaning could persist even when circumstances seemed hopeless. In homes, hope was nurtured in simple routines: a shared meal, a repaired roof, a letter from a distant relative, or a child's laughter breaking through the tension. It thrived in gardens tilled with care, in small businesses reopening their doors, in conversations exchanged over fences and kitchen tables. These everyday acts, seemingly mundane, were profound declarations of survival. They were the soft, enduring whispers that life could go on, that hardship did not have the final word. Even the economy, slowly recovering, became a source of quiet reassurance. Factories once idle now produced goods again. Farms yielded crops under the guidance of new agricultural programs. Jobs returned, wages rose cautiously, and Americans began to believe once more in their ability to provide for themselves and their families. Though the scars of the Depression remained visible, the nation's pulse grew stronger, steady, and more confident. Beyond material recovery, hope also carried moral and spiritual weight. Communities came together to support those in greatest need, fostering empathy and solidarity that would last for generations. Churches, schools, and civic organizations worked tirelessly to ensure that even the most vulnerable were cared for. People who had once been strangers became allies in endurance. In this shared struggle, the bonds of humanity deepened, and hope found a foothold in the simple knowledge that no one truly suffered alone. As the world edged closer to war in Europe and Asia, these whispers of hope became essential. The United States, still healing, faced the uncertainty of global conflict. Yet the strength cultivated during the Depression, the persistence, the ingenuity, the quiet courage, prepared a generation for the trials ahead. People had learned that even in the darkest times, action, compassion, and resilience could light a path forward. Hope was not a loud proclamation during these years. It was subtle, like the first stirrings of dawn or the soft green shoots of spring breaking through frost-hardened soil. It appeared in small kindnesses, in restored confidence, in communities stitching together the fabric of their lives after years of tearing. Each whisper mattered, each one a reminder that tomorrow could hold promise even when today seemed bleak. By the early 1940s, as the Depression waned and the nation prepared to face the challenges of war, the whispers of hope had grown into a chorus. They spoke not of certainty, nor of immediate triumph, but of the enduring capacity of the human spirit. They reminded Americans that they had survived fear, loss, and despair, and that survival itself was a victory. As you drift into sleep tonight, imagine these whispers surrounding you. The quiet strength of families rebuilding, the laughter of children in kitchens and schoolyards, the hum of factories once idle, and the gentle guidance of a nation learning to rise again. Hear the soft assurances of a world that refuses to be defeated, that continues to dream and hope even when shadows linger. The Great Depression was more than a period of economic collapse. It was a story of endurance, compassion, and the power of hope whispered softly across the land. And as the decade closed, the world, though still fragile, was waking once again to possibility. So let your mind rest in the warmth of these whispers. Let the courage, resilience, and quiet hope of those who endured guide you gently into sleep, one soft breath at a time, carrying the promise that even in hardship, light always returns. As you drift into sleep, remember, history lives softly in whispers, in stones, and in stories. Sometimes, greatness is not shouted from towers, but carried quietly across centuries, like a gentle dream that never truly ends. So let the echoes of the past wrap around you, calm and timeless. The rise and fall of empires, the laughter and tears of generations, all fading now into the hush of night. Rest easy, dreamer. Tomorrow will come, as it always has. But for now, let history sing you to sleep.